Welcome to Chatting Shit with Ostique, the podcast series where we chat about shit with inspirational people from all walks of life. Today, we are joined by the wonderful and inspiring Sally Allen. We hope you enjoy this conversation. So Sally, welcome to Chatting Shit with Ostique.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello, it's so lovely to have you here. And anyone who's watching this will also see that we're joined by Tony, who works with me at Ostique. She will be your host for season 3. And this is our last episode of season 2. So we thought we'd do this one together. So to begin with, before we get into it, we have loads and loads of questions we want to ask you and topics that we want to discuss. But before that, would you mind just doing kind of a brief introduction to yourself and also how you came to have your stoma?
Yeah, so I'm Sally, I'm 23. I didn't grow up. My story's a little bit different, as I explained in the blog post I did a couple of weeks ago. I never had any flare-ups growing up, from what I can remember. I'm sure there was maybe little telltale signs. But I grew up around at 20. My mum started to experience quite a lot of symptoms of ulcerative colitis. And I was not too sure about the disease itself. I just saw how much pain she was in, and it was horrible. And then myself, I went to university in Reading for around 2 years. And in my second year, just around the exam period, so I think a lot of stress had to do a lot with it, I experienced first about 2 weeks of extreme constipation, which I went to A&E about. And I was refused many, many times, just laughed off really, and told to just take laxatives, which is unfortunate. And then I returned back to my university city where the complete opposite happened. And as you know, extreme blood loss, no appetite, weight loss. I had hives all over my body, things like that. It was things that we don't know how we didn't correlate the similarities with my mum, but we just didn't. Went to A&E there again, and an ambulance was pushed off again due to, I'm guessing, my age, and I looked quite slim and fit. They didn't expect it to be anything else, and unfortunately it was my GP doctor at the time that saw my CRP levels and could tell there was something serious happening. So got rushed in for the final time, finally taken seriously. Spent a week on steroids after they found out it was extreme ulcerative colitis in my large bowel, all ulcers obviously all there. And spent around 5 to 6 days on extreme IV steroids, which unfortunately didn't work. And something I'm very open about, because I think awareness is really, really important. I did not understand. I had some sort of idea what a stoma was, but I did not understand it at all. So any questions or any confusion, I'm not offended by. I'd answer questions all day. I was told what it was, and then had my surgery the next morning. And it's been 2 years. Hasn't been easy, but I've now decided that I'm going to complete my stoma after my studies. I'm nearly at the end of my studies. I'm going to complete it soon, and then that's really it for me. I've got future plans of I'm doing a law degree, and a future plans of being a disability advocate as well, so just helping people in the law profession with any sort of disability.
Thank you so much for that intro. We really want to get into the disability advocacy that you want to do a little bit later on. You mentioned you're going to complete your stoma. Is it temporary at the moment?
At the moment it is. However, I think they kept that temporary due to me not even knowing I had ulcerative colitis. They wanted to give me that choice. I think at the start I would have chosen to reverse it, but after obviously research and just experiencing it myself and understanding and meeting people that have had both reversals and had their bag back, I've understood what's probably the best decision for myself.
Well, it's a decision that a lot of the community have to make. We did an episode about that earlier in the season as well. And I think doing research and really understanding what that operation involves and what the aftermath might be was a very, very good decision. So, you mentioned that you were turned away multiple times when you went to the hospital with symptoms. This, unfortunately, is something that we hear a lot, especially with the women that we speak to on the podcast, and especially with the younger women that we speak to on the podcast. I was wondering, A, what that experience was like for you, and B, if it differed at all from your mum's experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there was 2 major elements to how I was treated. I think one being COVID. So I was always going in by myself, and because of how I was feeling, I probably didn't have the strength to fight enough for when I was getting pushed off. And I think that was one major issue. And then, as I said, where I was so ill, I didn't have that strength to say, no, it really doesn't feel right. I'd just be like, okay, and then just like get myself back to my room and just lay there for another few hours. Like, I think that's a very major thing. I think especially, I think one thing that is an issue with younger girls going through something like this, weight loss isn't seen as a bad thing. So, for example, myself, I didn't see that. I wasn't putting all those issues or those factors into a big group and thinking, actually, no, this altogether is really alarming. I was like, oh yeah, I look slim, and then obviously the doctors are doing that too, and they're thinking, oh well, she looks quite healthy, even though looking back you could tell on my face something wasn't right. Sorry, I've gone on a tangent. Yeah. So yeah, those two factors I think were a big thing during that. And then in terms of comparison to my mum, so she was struggling through years. However, as soon as she made that notice to her doctor, due to, I'm guessing, bowel cancer being more prevalent in older women, she got the test straight away, and she found out straight away. She got hives, and obviously the blood started, rightfully so, but it should be the same for obviously younger people as well. She got that test straight away and got her diagnosis, and the medical treatment came straight away. And obviously it's a long process, trying to navigate the best medications and how many tablets. She's still struggling with that today. However, yeah, that compared to mine, which was, if anything, my symptoms were a lot more severe than my mum's. My mum's was a bit more of a managed blood loss every day. Mine was, I haven't got off the toilet in 3 days, I haven't eaten, I've woken up in my own situation. It's not, mine was completely opposite and much more severe, but the treatment was completely different.
So I would love to dive into what recovery was like from your surgery, if we may. And I'd love to split that into two parts. So first, the physical recovery, but then also the mental recovery, as I understand that you, as like lots of people, had a kind of delayed grieving process, if we can call it that. So yeah, if we perhaps start with the physical recovery.
Yeah, so I was in hospital for around 3 weeks. The first week prior to the surgery, and then 2 weeks was recovery, plus the stoma nurses didn't want me to leave until I was obviously confident to change and empty my bag by myself, which I appreciate. The aftercare was really, really good in hospital. Yeah, they make sure you understand what you're doing, and they make sure you're mentally and physically there. Physical recovery, quite a big shock. I've been into fitness quite a lot since I was about 16, so to physically feel such an extreme change in your strength of day-to-day activities was quite a big shock. Sorry, I do live opposite school, so if you hear children
Can't
screaming,
hear any
that's
screaming,
why.
don't worry.
So yeah, that was quite a big shock. For example, when I got home, I would straight away try and do things, and I'd shock my body. Like, I remember I was trying to help out in the kitchen, and I went to go bend down to get something out the cupboard, and I was like, I can't get back up. So like, my mum had to come help me, bless her. Yeah, and I think a lot, it probably does delve into the mental part of it, but I'm so much of a doer, and I get that off my mum. I can't do nothing. My days off from university and work, I have to do something. I can't do nothing. So I found that really hard to physically have to do nothing some days. I mean, I probably definitely didn't do nothing, but I tried to. So feeling that physical difference was really hard. I mean, I slowly tried to get back into fitness again and feeling good. However, I think as soon as the surgery and that type of shock went off from my body, it was I was taking prednisolone for around 8 to 9 months after, and that was because obviously I took it for a week prior to surgery. Then they had to keep me on it because my CRP remained really high despite having surgery. And then the weaning off process, unfortunately, really did not go well for me. Every time I reduced the tablet just by one, so obviously I've still got my rectal stump right now, it would react terribly. I've been in the most pain, blood, everything. So that process really, if I'll be completely honest, the stoma was really hard to get used to. However, the prednisolone and the effect it had on me physically, mentally, was the worst part of it. So once that weaning process was finally over, and the weight came off and the crazy cravings went, I don't know how I ate that much food. It was horrible. You'd eat and you're like, right, so what's next? So once that kind of eased off, I physically could get back to what I would normally day to day do. So I'm a big fan of spin classes, going to the gym. that really did get to come back into my normal process. I'd say mentally, again, it goes into the fact that it was COVID. That's when I was in hospital. So unfortunately, I could only have I saw my mum once the night before surgery. I couldn't have anyone visit me bedside, and even when I could see my mum, they had to wheel me, and then I couldn't talk because I was so tired and obviously drained. And I'd say I'm quite mentally headstrong. So during that whole process, during 3 weeks in hospital, I think I cried once. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's just I think it's the shock and the process I was going through. There was one day that I just kept the curtains closed and I didn't speak to anyone. I That was, I think that was my first day of grieving. I think it was the second day after surgery. I just didn't want to speak to anyone, have the curtains closed. But I would say, and a lot of people were coming up to me in hospital, all their healthcare assistants were like, "You're dealing with this so well," and I was like, "Thanks." But I obviously didn't understand the process that was going to come after, and it wasn't till, I think my mum would probably say, 8 months to a year after is when the grieving process really started. Because I think it's something I touched on in the blog. It's really easy to, rightfully so, and I completely understand and sympathise with people that do, but for it to become your whole life and to get kind of consumed in the fact that you've now got an illness, I've now got a disability, which I think was like the momentum to get me through that first 8 months to a year. And it was like, oh, this is happening. And then when everything kind of settled down and like everyone was kind of just went back to normal life, and I realised these changes that I'm physically going to have to make in my life, and maybe relationships are going to be harder, or my career is going to be harder, or friends and things like that. When that all started to settle down is when the real grieving process started. So I think I'd just be there one day and just burst out crying. The realization would hit. But my mum was a great support system. She was always there for my little breakdowns. But yeah, completely now, following year from that, mentally, obviously you have your times, like body confidence, as a girl anyway, as I'm sure you can understand, is not fun. Navigating the world just with normal day-to-day expectations of women is horrible. But then with that added on, it's a whole nother process to navigate. But I'm thankful for it because it makes me put them all into perspective and realise what actually matters. And it doesn't matter if I've got bigger legs or this, because there's something a bit more important going on.
I would love to talk about the fact that you're studying law at uni and the fact that you want to go into kind of disability advocacy later on. You did an amazing post for us for our social media, which will be coming out in a couple of weeks, that spoke about reasonable adjustments. And I'd love if you would explain what that is, what people's kind of rights are in the workplace, and just generally kind of what you've learned about that so far.
Yeah. So sorry if I get anything wrong, but I'll just base it on my knowledge. So yeah. So you've got the Equality Act, and it states that in the workplace, if you've got a disability or a long-term health condition, you are entitled to reasonable adjustments from your employer. So that could include anything from making the uniform more accommodating, physical changes of the workplace. So for example, if you're a wheelchair user, you be on the ground floor, or if you aren't given a chair, you should be given a chair. Things like that need to be made accommodating. Even sick pay, or if you're in hospital a lot, they need to put these flexible working hours in for you. And if that process isn't taken, if that understanding is not there from the get-go when you start, or you let them know of your disability, then they can be liable for a discrimination claim. So yeah, those processes need to be taken in place. For example, when you apply to a job, there should always be a question of if you believe you have a disability. If you submit yes to that question, that should automatically start a conversation. If it doesn't, then promote the conversation. And obviously, if it goes down that path of things not being done for you, then you really do have a case or something that needs to be reported.
Thank you for flagging that. I think that's a really, really important thing for people with any kind of disability to be aware of. And I don't know if everybody is, and if everybody knows their rights. Certainly people have mentioned that to us before. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm interested to understand what the experience has been like having a stoma at uni. Have you had sort of any anxiety around attending lectures or seminars, or has anything been perhaps different for you post-surgery? Because obviously you did 1 or 2 years of uni prior to the surgery as well. So yeah, really keen to understand the differences.
Yeah, so I was at university just under 2 years before I got ill. And then when I joined back again, I studied from home. That was one because I was quite uncomfortable with the idea of living with people due to obviously needing the toilet, my medical things. I think it was just comfortability. Um, so that second year, I had to redo second year. So that year was really hard because I was traveling in from university, and on days where you didn't feel great, I did depend on the online quite a lot, which is understandable, and I wouldn't regret it. However, I'm really happy that I've now, in my third year, I found a shared house, and I put out an advert to find an ensuite room, which I perfectly found. I've got a great group of friends now, and we've actually just been away together for the weekend. They're a great group of friends, really, really good friends. And so something I'd say in terms of accommodation, even it's not necessary, but I think for peace of mind in terms of obviously off smells and things like that, it's a really good idea to have your own bathroom, I'd say, just to avoid any sort of option. And you can have all your medical equipment out. You don't need to worry about that being an issue. In terms of lectures and seminars, that is something I still do struggle with. The first thing I'll say is you need to obviously, I email my lecturers at the start of each term and let them know about my situation. So if I'm ever leaving the room without saying anything, or I always like to sit by the door, things like that, they're aware of that. It just saves the conversation or that awkwardness for you in person. I would say still lectures and seminars, I do still get a bit worried because, they've got a mind of their own. They can make noises, you can do whatever. And it does I think that's just a mental element, as I mentioned in the blog as well. It's a mental element to it. You need to understand that if someone hears a noise, they're not going to automatically think it's a stoma. They might just think you haven't eaten, you've got a rumbly belly. So that's what I try to keep my mind doing. There is tips and tricks. I'm sure everybody is aware of what helps their stoma personally. So I know if I don't eat enough, it's probably going to be more active. Obviously, depending on the type of food you're having too, make sure you're hydrated and you're prepared for the session, because seminars are at least an hour long, lectures are at least an hour long. So it's just having your own little routine, which you're going to gather anyway throughout the process.
It's really interesting what you said about, that the fact that you have, I don't know whether it was an initiative that you took or that somebody gave you the advice to message and email your lecturers in advance and kind of to sit by the door, because that's a really insightful tip and actually I would say quite brave to put yourself out there. And as I said, is that something you knew to do? Was that a recommendation? And what kind of things were you very open? Because sometimes I don't know whether, maybe in the first instance you felt shy about saying it, or were you kind of quite confident about it?
It's a good question. I think it's two parts really. I think it was my own initiative because I'd rather email it and they know without me having to go up to them and say, or in front of everybody. So part initiative, but also it's actually something that is being brought into the law a lot more recently. So I researched if there was any lawyers with stoma bags. Me and my sister were like, oh, let's have a look. And I actually found a really successful, really great, inspiring man called Simon Maynard, and he's a commercial lawyer too. And I'll try and link some things for you guys to post, but it was really good. He's created this new guide in terms of commercial disputes. So, for example, I'm sure he won't mind me speaking on it. I'll double check, but I'm sure he wouldn't. He's actually helped create this guide for commercial disputes. So when you're going into litigations or court dates, court hearings, he personally doesn't feel comfortable wearing certain formal clothing. So he wears his own thing that might not be deemed as formal as others. Also, if he needs to leave or he's got an issue with his stoma and needs to go to the toilet, in a very formal court hearing where you've got a judge and you've got very an important hearing to do, you wouldn't feel comfortable in that place to openly speak up and explain what's going on. So he's introduced these formalities to being put in place for lawyers with disabilities, whether that's physical or invisible, to place these things so that you're not, one, going to be called up on it, or you're not going to be thought of as rude, or your skill and your knowledge isn't going to be deemed lower because of those things. It's that, as well as my own initiative, was like, well, these things need to be put in place anyway, so I might as well act on them already.
That's so fantastic. And when you did speak to your lecturers and within the seminars, was that really well received? Did they ask questions? Like, did they understand? And could you have an open conversation? And equally, did you think or have you had those other conversations with your peers? Not necessarily just your friendship groups, but kind of did anybody else have questions about anything for you?
Yeah, so every time I've emailed a tutor, they're completely fine. I think maybe in school, but obviously I haven't had a stoma in school, but in university you're seen as an adult. If you want to leave, you can leave. It's not an issue. However, where I take my studies really seriously and I'm really trying to succeed, I don't want them to have any sort of idea that I'm just leaving or things like that. They perceived it really well. They were like, completely, that's fine. Just let me know anything I can do to help. Really understanding. I haven't really gone into detail with my like module leaders. However, my personal tutor, because I've had to go to him about the fact I transferred from a different university, he knows a bit more about my personal situation. We've spoke on it, and he actually knows someone in his family who's got colitis. So you just really do actually develop an even more of an understanding, and you can educate them, and they can share stories with you too. So yeah, that was a really great conversation we had. In terms of peers, I studied medical negligence last year, and at the start of the module, the lecturer, she's lovely, she just wanted to know why everyone picked it, and I openly just explained. I just thought, oh, why not? Because a lot of other people had things too that I didn't know what that meant, and they'd explain it, and I did the same too. So definitely putting yourself in spaces where you are probably going to be with a more diverse group is a great idea. Same with my other modules, really. I can't remember how it came up now when I explained, and another girl in my class actually got diagnosed with diabetes recently, so we could compare on certain things we have to change about our lives and things like that. So yeah, I think it's really, you've just got, as soon as you do it the first time and you realise that people aren't going to look at you differently, or if they do, then it's not someone you really want in your circle. As soon as you do that, you realise it's so much easier, and it adds so much to you. It really adds a development. It adds development to your character, and it gives you so much to talk about because people are interested if they're the right type of person.
That's so great to hear, and I think when you said you've just been away with a group of friends, and that same kind of momentum and ability to have those conversations and with your friends. And I kind of just want to just ask that one final question on that. When you, with your initial circle of friends, so the people that you've grown up with and known, as well as new friends at university, so not when your medical negligence course, where actually it's really relevant and sometimes a bit more at ease to have those conversations, was it difficult to explain, or again, because you were in hospital, it actually came really easy to have those conversations? And now this, does it ever, something you said right at the beginning of the conversation, which is understandably for some people it become their whole world, but for you it's just something that you have as opposed to it taking over your life. So is it something you would say to a new friend or not?
So that's something I'm trying to navigate to this day. I only do it if it's relevant. So, for example, with my new group of friends now, I've obviously met them because I was moving in, and I had to explain certain things, just to obviously they'll need to know. Especially when we were going away, it was quite nice to know that without me having to even say anything, I wasn't planning on telling the other friends. So it was our group of friends plus some others that I'd never met before, and I was completely fine with them not knowing and just dealing with it. However, the close friends I met pulled me aside and just which really warmed my heart. Really, it was like, oh, people actually do understand. She said, oh, would you feel comfortable if I personally just let people know about of the situation? Won't go into detail, but just let them know, because if you need to leave quietly, or for example, there was the house we stayed in, there was one room with one bed, and I felt more comfortable in that room. And she just offered to let people know personally and quietly, so then no assumptions were made if I left or wasn't drinking as much, things like that. So that was really, really nice, and I hold that dearly. She's a great friend.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was just nice because you're so used to, when you go through these things by yourself, you're so used to just having to be strong and think of things for yourself. So when people do it automatically, it's like, oh, it's nice.
It's automatic, but with kindness,
Oh,
and
yes, yeah.
yeah, it's amazing.
Did I
Our
answer your question? Sorry, I'm not sure if I did.
No, you
Oh, yeah.
you absolutely did, and then some. And actually, I think one last question, which I think that's, you've already kind of given one inclination of how to deal with these sorts of things. But what would you say to somebody who's got surgery coming up? What they can expect, what they should be aware of? Any tips that you can give?
Yeah, so if it's the initial surgery coming up, in terms of preparation, I might not be the best person. I can obviously give overall advice just because I wasn't really given much time. I would just say you've got to, I always say this and it's probably a bit retrospect, but it's really important to look at the positives. So as much as it's going to change your life completely, and the step backs you're going to have to take, for example, this has added an extra 2 years onto my career, you need to think about the positives that you can do within that time. So despite this causing so much change and upset and like making you grieve a completely different life that you've once what you had, you've got to kind of spin it on its head and think, oh no, this has given me a new opportunity to take my life in a new direction. Me and my sister, she's like my life coach. She's great. And we always think this has actually given me like a drive. It's given me a direction in terms of my law career and in terms of my personality as well. It's she said she always sees it in me that it's really given me that platform and that direction. So I think as long as you, and that's not me saying you need to be positive all the time. I'm not positive all the time. I have the days where I'm upset or I'm just, oh, why is this me, type of thing. But as long as you overall are driving forward and you see the positives that you can make out of such a negative situation, you'll always be fine. And the community is great. It really is great. It will keep you going.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences and advice. It will be so helpful to so many people. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have you seen the new Ostique skins yet? Ostique skins are revolutionary ostomy pouch covers that were created to make the wearer feel confident, sexy and powerful in all of life's moments. From moments of intimacy to lounging by the pool, conquering a workout or simply heading out to lunch, skins have you covered. Even better, they're compatible with all major colostomy and ileostomy bags. Ostique skins are available in a range of colours and skin tones, and they're made from a revolutionary material that's completely waterproof, high quality, soft and comfortable. Skins are easy to use, even with reduced dexterity, and they work with both closed and drainable bags. Plus, skins are also environmentally friendly and vegan. There are 4 bundles available to buy now, and you can also purchase individual skins. Head to ostique.co.uk to find out more.